There are moments in life when you look at someone you love and suddenly realize you never really knew them at all. A friend who changed overnight, a coworker who betrayed you when you let your guard down, a stranger who surprised you, for better or worse. We think we understand people, that kindness means loyalty, confidence means competence, silence means peace. But humans are far more complicated. Behind every smile is a story. Behind every argument is a wound. Behind every action is a fear or desire, even they don't fully see. And the painful part isn't that people fooled you, it's that no one ever taught you how to read them. We learn math, grammar, history, but not human nature, the motives, patterns, and silent signals shaping every connection in our lives. But imagine being able to see people clearly, to understand why they hurt you, love you, leave, return, or sabotage themselves. And sometimes you. Imagine walking into any room and instantly sensing who's insecure, who's genuine, who's threatened by you, and who's quietly competing with you. This is The Power Inside the Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. A book some call dark, but one that actually exposes truths we all feel and rarely admit. Understanding these laws isn't about controlling people. It's about protecting your peace, strengthening your relationships, and seeing the world as it truly is. So settle in, because once you understand human nature, your relationships change, your decisions change, your entire destiny changes. Welcome to The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene, and welcome to the part of life nobody teaches us, but everyone needs. Law 1, the law of irrationality. Master your emotional self. We like to believe we are rational creatures, that we think things through, that our decisions come from logic and reason. But this is one of the most comforting lies we tell ourselves. In reality, emotion always moves first. Thought follows later, not to decide, but to explain. You are not a rational being. You are governed by emotions. Look closely at human behavior and you'll see it everywhere. Someone explodes over a harmless comment. Someone walks away from a relationship they desperately wanted to keep. Someone destroys an opportunity they worked years to earn. And afterward, they explain it. They justify it. They convince themselves it was logical, but the choice was already made by fear, anger, envy, or insecurity. Reason simply arrived later to make it sound respectable. In ancient Athens, one leader understood this better than most. During a brutal war and a devastating plague, the people turned emotional, angry, and afraid. They blamed Pericles for their suffering. They insulted him publicly. They attacked his reputation. Most leaders would have reacted, defended themselves, fought back. He did none of that. He understood that when emotions are high, logic has no audience. Any response in that moment would only pour fuel on the fire. So he waited. And when the emotional storm passed, he spoke calmly, without bitterness, without defensiveness. Because of that restraint, his authority didn't weaken, it deepened. The people didn't just listen to him, they trusted him. He didn't win by overpowering others. He won by mastering himself. This law operates quietly every day. A manager rejects a strong idea, not because it's flawed, but because it threatens their sense of importance. A friend grows distant, not because you changed, but because your progress exposed something they haven't faced in themselves. Someone insists they're just being honest, when in reality they're acting from resentment they don't understand. People don't act based on what's true. They act based on what they feel, and then search for reasons afterward. This is why arguments rarely change minds, why facts fail to persuade, why emotional wounds shape behavior far more than logic ever does. Emotion itself isn't the enemy. Unawareness is. When you don't recognize your emotions, they quietly run your life from the background. When you do recognize them, they lose their grip. The discipline is simple, but not easy. Slow your reactions, observe the feeling, create space before action. Because the moment you pause, emotion weakens and clarity returns. Mastering irrationality doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. You stop expecting logic from emotional people. You stop taking reactions personally. You stop sacrificing long-term outcomes for short-term relief. Most importantly, you stop being manipulated by your own unconscious impulses. And once you begin mastering your emotional self, you start noticing something deeper beneath human behavior, a constant hunger to be seen, validated, and valued. Law 2, the law of narcissism, transforms self-love into empathy. Every person you meet is living inside their own story. In that story, they are the center, the hero, the one whose feelings matter most. This isn't selfishness, it's human nature. We are all narcissists at heart. Most people don't see the world as it is. They see it through the lens of how it affects them. This is why praise feels intoxicating, why criticism feels unbearable, why small slights linger far longer than kindness. Narcissism exists on a spectrum. At one end is the deeply insecure type, constantly seeking attention, easily wounded, unable to handle disagreement or feedback. At the other end is a healthier form, where someone has a stable sense of self and doesn't need the world to constantly reflect it back. The problem isn't self-love. The problem is when self-love turns into hunger, and that hunger begins to consume everything around it. Louis XIV understood this instinctively. He ruled for over 70 years, not through brute force alone, but by mastering human vanity. He surrounded himself with powerful nobles, men who could have threatened his authority. Instead of confronting them, he absorbed them. Titles, ceremonies, constant attention. Their entire identity revolved around his approval. Their hunger to be admired kept them loyal. Their narcissism was satisfied and neutralized. Power didn't come from crushing egos, it came from feeding them carefully. You see this pattern everywhere. A friend supports you, but only until your success outshines theirs. A coworker helps, but needs recognition in return. A partner listens, but always redirects the conversation back to themselves. Some dominate conversations, some fish for compliments, some play the victim, some help others only to feel superior. All of it comes from the same place, the need to feel important. When that need goes unmet, people grow bitter, defensive, or manipulative. When it's met in healthy ways, they become generous and open. Your task is to transform your self-love into empathy. The moment you understand narcissism, people stop confusing you. Their reactions stop feeling personal. Their behavior starts making sense. You recognize when praise is needed, when silence is safer, when someone feels threatened, and why. This doesn't mean feeding egos endlessly. It means seeing what drives people without being pulled into their hunger. You stop trying to be understood. You start understanding. And once you do, you begin noticing something else. To protect their self-image, people don't just seek admiration. They wear masks. Law 3, the law of role-playing. See through people's masks. Most people are not who they appear to be, not because they're lying, but because they're performing. From an early age, we learn which parts of ourselves are accepted and which parts are dangerous to reveal. Over time, we adjust. We shape ourselves into roles that feel safer. Confidence becomes armor. Kindness becomes strategy. Silence becomes protection. People wear masks to hide their insecurities and weaknesses. And after wearing these masks long enough, many forget they're wearing them at all. A person who appears bold may be terrified of being ignored. A person who seems distant may fear rejection. A constant entertainer may be hiding sadness they never learned how to express. These aren't lies in the usual sense. They're survival strategies. Roles form through repetition, through reward and punishment, through moments where being authentic felt unsafe. And once a role works, it hardens. In Renaissance courts, survival depended on performance. Nobles mastered flattery, charm, and restraint, not because they were sincere, but because a single misstep could cost them everything. They spoke carefully, smiled selectively, hid true intentions behind elegance and politeness. Those who mistook appearance for reality were often the first to fall. The ones who survived understood a simple truth. Behavior is a role. Patterns reveal the person. You see this law everywhere today. A coworker praises you constantly, not out of generosity, but to stay close to someone rising fast. A friend becomes the strong one, not because they don't feel pain, but because vulnerability once cost them respect. A partner avoids conflict, not because they're calm, but because needing someone feels too risky. Words create impressions. Roles create comfort, but neither reveal truth. What matters is repetition. Consistency reveals character. Patterns expose intention. Someone may apologize endlessly, but if behavior never changes, the pattern is the truth. Someone may promise loyalty, but vanish when support is needed. The pattern is the truth. The most reliable indicator of character is behavior over time. When you stop taking masks at face value, people become clearer. Their fears, their motivations, their limits. And once you begin seeing through masks, you notice something even more unsettling. Some people don't just wear roles, they are driven by them, again and again, without choice. That is where character reveals its true strength. Law 4, the law of compulsive behavior, determine the strength of people's character. Once you see through people's masks, you begin to notice something deeper and far more revealing. People don't just act once, they repeat, again and again, across situations, across relationships, across years. Character is not revealed in grand moments, it reveals itself in patterns. Character is fate. Most people believe they can change whenever they choose. But in reality, behavior follows deeply ingrained paths, formed early in life and reinforced through habit. Under pressure, people don't rise to the occasion. They fall back to their strongest pattern. Some people always create drama when things become calm. Some sabotage success just before it arrives. Some repeat the same relationship mistakes, with different faces but identical outcomes. These aren't coincidences. They're compulsions. Unconscious habits that feel familiar, even when they cause pain. A person who grew up unheard may dominate every conversation. A person who grew up controlled may resist authority at all costs. A person who learned love was conditional may chase validation endlessly. They may swear they're different now. They may promise change. But patterns speak louder than intention. History offers countless examples of this law. Alexander the Great possessed extraordinary talent, intelligence, and ambition. But he also had a compulsive need for conquest and glory. Even when he had already built one of the greatest empires in history, he couldn't stop. Each victory demanded another. Each triumph fed the hunger. Eventually, that compulsion exhausted his body, his judgment, and his life. Talent opened doors. Character determined the ending. You see the same dynamic in everyday life. Someone who lies casually in small matters will lie decisively when stakes are high. Someone who avoids responsibility in minor tasks will collapse under major ones. Someone who blames others for small failures will never grow from large ones. How people treat waiters, how they react to criticism, how they behave when bored, frustrated, or unnoticed. These moments aren't insignificant. They are previews. Small behaviors are the seeds of great outcomes. Certain compulsive types are especially dangerous to ignore. The perpetual victim, always wronged, never accountable. The drama creator, calm feels unbearable, chaos feels familiar. The perfectionist, paralyzed by fear of imperfection. The rebel, opposing authority even when it helps them. The talker, full of promises, empty on follow-through. Each believes their behavior is justified. Each feels trapped inside it. And most are unaware they're repeating anything at all. This law is not about judging people. It's about reading them clearly. Once you recognize a pattern, you stop arguing with it. You stop expecting change without evidence. You stop investing where history shows collapse. You stop confusing potential with reality. Character doesn't change through words. It changes only through sustained, painful self-awareness, something most people never commit to. The real power of this law is internal. When you notice your own repeating patterns, your reactions, your excuses, your self-sabotage, you gain the rare chance to interrupt them. Awareness creates choice. Choice creates freedom. And once you start observing character in yourself and others, you realize something else is always operating beneath behavior. A quiet comparison, a restless desire, a longing for what others have. And that brings us to the next force shaping human behavior: covetousness. Law 5, the law of covetousness, become an elusive object of desire. Once you understand character, you begin to notice something quietly shaping human behavior everywhere. Comparison. People don't want things in isolation. They want what other people have. Desire rarely begins inside us. It's sparked by watching someone else possess what we lack. Status, attention, freedom, love, recognition. We are marked by continual desire for what we do not have. And the moment we obtain it, the desire moves on. This is why satisfaction feels so temporary. Someone finally gets the job they wanted and immediately starts comparing themselves to someone higher up. Someone enters a relationship and begins noticing what others seem to have instead. Someone buys something they dreamed of, and within weeks, it feels ordinary. Desire feeds on distance, not possession. You see this law operating constantly. A coworker becomes distant after you receive praise. A friend feels uneasy around your happiness, even if they congratulate you. A family member subtly competes, measuring themselves against your progress. On the surface, everything looks polite. Underneath, comparison is working silently. Envy doesn't always look like hatred. Sometimes it looks like indifference. Sometimes sarcasm. Sometimes helpful advice meant to shrink you. History reveals this pattern clearly. In royal courts, influence didn't come from honesty or openness. It came from mystery. Those who revealed everything lost value. Those who remained slightly distant became irresistible. Kings, advisors, and courtiers understood something most people forget today. What is fully accessible is rarely desired. What feels just out of reach becomes magnetic. This is why oversharing weakens attraction, why constant availability lowers interest, why predictability kills curiosity. People say they want transparency, but they respond to mystery. They want space to imagine. Covetousness isn't just about material things. People covet attention others receive, confidence others project, freedom others seem to possess, the ease someone else's life appears to have now. And social media amplifies this endlessly. We compare our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel and wonder why we feel restless, dissatisfied, incomplete. But here's the deeper truth. People who are constantly chasing what others have never develop a solid sense of self. Their desires are reactive, borrowed, unstable. They move from goal to goal, relationship to relationship, identity to identity, always wanting, never arriving. The power in this law comes from reversal. When you stop chasing approval, stop broadcasting everything, stop competing loudly, you become harder to read, harder to predict, harder to replace, and paradoxically, more desirable. This isn't manipulation, it's self-containment. You learn to value your time. You learn to withdraw strategically. You learn to let people feel the absence of you. Desire grows in space. Respect grows in restraint. Most importantly, you stop being controlled by other people's success. You stop measuring your worth externally. You stop letting envy poison your peace. Because the moment you stop comparing, you regain something rare. Contentment. And with contentment comes clarity. But there's another danger hidden beneath desire. When comparison turns inward, people begin to act against themselves. They sabotage progress. They resist growth. They unconsciously destroy what they claim to want. And that leads us to a far more personal force: short-sightedness. Law 6, the law of short-sightedness. Elevate your perspective. Most people don't ruin their lives in one dramatic moment. They ruin them quietly, through small decisions that feel good now and cost them dearly later. Short-sightedness is the inability to see beyond the present emotion. The pressure of now overwhelms the consequences of tomorrow. Hunger replaces patience, relief replaces strategy, impulse replaces foresight, and the future quietly pays the price. You see this everywhere. Someone reacts emotionally to a single insult and destroys a relationship that took years to build. Someone takes a shortcut for quick money and damages a reputation that could have supported them for life. Someone avoids a difficult conversation today and inherits a far bigger conflict months later. In the moment, the choice feels justified. Later, it feels irreversible. Human beings are wired for immediacy. Our instincts evolved for survival, not for long-term planning. The brain prioritizes comfort over growth, relief over responsibility, certainty over possibility. The future feels abstract. The present feels urgent, so we act. This is why people repeat the same mistakes even when they know better. A person returns to a toxic relationship because loneliness hurts more right now than the slow damage that relationship causes. A leader silences dissent because control feels safer today than the instability honesty might create. A company sacrifices long-term trust for short-term profit and spends years repairing the damage. The present moment always argues louder than the future. History offers endless proof of this blindness. There was once a government program designed to eliminate a dangerous problem quickly. They paid citizens for every threat they brought in. At first, the results looked impressive. The numbers went up. The program seemed to work. Then, people started breeding the very thing the program was meant to eliminate, just to collect the reward. When the program ended, the problem was worse than before. A short-term solution created a long-term disaster. This is the hidden trap of short-sightedness. When you focus only on immediate results, you create consequences you never intended. The future always collects interest. Short-sightedness also shows up in how people interpret events. They judge based on today's mood, not long-term patterns. They assume a single win proves competence. They assume a single failure proves weakness. They overreact to temporary conditions and underreact to structural problems. This is why crowds panic, why markets swing wildly, why reputations rise and fall irrationally. People mistake motion for progress. The rare advantage in life is distance. Distance from emotion, distance from urgency, distance from noise. When you step back, patterns emerge. You start asking different questions. Where does this path lead? What repeats here? Who benefits long term? What am I not seeing yet? Perspective turns chaos into sequence. Those who rise consistently share one trait. They delay reaction. They resist the temptation to respond immediately. They don't confuse urgency with importance. They understand that power grows quietly, while impulsiveness announces itself loudly. They trade short-term validation for long-term positioning. This doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming strategic. You act, but only after the emotional fog clears. You decide, but only after imagining consequences. You move, but with awareness of where the path leads. Once you elevate your perspective, you stop being pulled by the moment. You stop chasing quick wins that sabotage deeper goals. You stop reacting to people who want immediate control over your emotions. You begin playing a longer game, and when you do, you start noticing something else. People resist anything that threatens their self-image, even when it helps them. They defend their mistakes, they reject feedback, they protect their ego at all costs. That resistance has a name: defensiveness. Law 7, the law of defensiveness. Soften people's resistance by confirming their self-opinion. The fastest way to lose influence over someone is to make them feel inferior. It doesn't matter how accurate your point is. It doesn't matter how logical your argument sounds. The moment a person feels attacked, they stop listening. Not because you're wrong, but because their identity feels threatened. Every person carries an internal image of who they are. I am independent. I am intelligent. I am a good person. These beliefs are fragile, and people protect them fiercely, challenge them directly, and resistance appears instantly. Not debate, not discussion, defense. You see this everywhere. Offer advice, and someone bristles. Point out a mistake, and excuses flood the room. Ask a simple question, and emotions rise. A coworker rejects your suggestion not because it's flawed, but because accepting it would mean admitting they missed something. A partner shuts down during conflict, not because they don't care, but because being wrong feels like humiliation. A friend reacts angrily to feedback because it threatens their self-image as competent, capable, or kind. People don't defend ideas. They defend who they believe they are. This is why facts often fail to persuade. The more you push, the more the other person digs in. Logic feels like an attack. Evidence feels like exposure. And once defensiveness activates, nothing gets through. There is a quieter, far more effective approach. Instead of attacking someone's self-image, you confirm it. You make them feel seen, not corrected. You acknowledge their intelligence, their intentions, their autonomy before guiding them elsewhere. This doesn't mean lying. It means understanding leverage. History makes this clear. Those who held power for long rarely humiliated others openly. They offered dignity first. They allowed opponents to save face, to feel respected, capable, and in control. Once pride was protected, movement became possible. People accept change only when it doesn't feel like a loss of identity. Defensiveness weakens when people feel safe, and safety doesn't come from agreement. It comes from dignity. This is why skilled persuaders listen more than they speak. They let others explain themselves fully. They mirror language. They validate emotions without endorsing behavior. The message beneath the words is simple. I see you. I understand your reasoning. You are not foolish. Only then does influence begin. But this law cuts both ways. Defensiveness isn't just something others display. It's something you carry too. Notice when criticism triggers anger, feedback feels personal, disagreement feels disrespectful. Those reactions are signals. The ego is protecting an image. The moment you recognize that, you regain control. Instead of reacting, you observe. Instead of justifying, you reflect. That pause alone makes you more powerful than most people in the room. Those who master this law stop fighting resistance head-on. They guide indirectly. They plant ideas. They allow others to arrive at conclusions themselves. Because people don't want to be changed. They want to feel like they chose. Once you understand defensiveness, you stop arguing with walls. You stop forcing insight on people who aren't ready. You conserve energy. And slowly, something becomes clear. When resistance fades, another pattern appears beneath it. People often act against their own interests, not because they want to fail, but because part of them is afraid of success. Law 8. The law of self-sabotage. Change your circumstances by changing your attitude. Many people don't fail because the world is against them. They fail because part of them is. They want success, but fear the exposure it brings. They want love, but fear the vulnerability it demands. They want change, but fear the identity they would have to leave behind. So they hesitate, they delay, they derail themselves, and then they call it bad luck. Self-sabotage is rarely dramatic. It's subtle. It shows up as procrastination, as sudden loss of motivation, as unnecessary conflict at the worst possible moment. A person inches close to an opportunity and suddenly creates a crisis. A relationship starts becoming real and small arguments begin to appear. A long-term goal nears completion and distractions multiply. These aren't accidents, they're protective reflexes. The mind is wired to seek safety, not growth. And safety often means familiarity, even if that familiarity is painful. The unknown feels dangerous. Success raises expectations. Change threatens identity. So the unconscious mind intervenes, not to destroy you, but to protect you from perceived risk. You see this pattern everywhere. A capable employee misses deadlines right before a promotion. A talented individual never finishes projects, staying safely potential instead of visible. Someone repeatedly chooses partners who can't commit, confirming the belief that love is unreliable. The surface story changes, the pattern doesn't. At the core of self-sabotage is attitude. Not optimism or positivity, but the lens through which you interpret events. Some people move through life expecting hostility, rejection, and limitation. They brace for disappointment. They scan for threats. They assume failure before effort begins. And slowly, that expectation becomes reality. Not because the world confirms it, but because their behavior does. Others adopt a different posture. They expect resistance, but not defeat. They see setbacks as information, not identity. They don't internalize failure. They study it. They don't ask, why does this always happen to me? They ask, what is this teaching me? Same circumstances, different outcomes. This law doesn't ask you to deny fear. It asks you to notice it before it takes control. Pay attention to moments when progress feels uncomfortable. Momentum triggers anxiety. Success feels undeserved. That's where sabotage begins. Instead of pulling away, pause. Name the feeling. Fear loses power when it becomes conscious. Change doesn't happen through force. It happens through repeated, deliberate action that contradicts old beliefs. Small risks taken consistently, small commitments kept, small proofs that your old story isn't absolute truth. As behavior shifts, attitude follows. And as attitude changes, circumstances rearrange. The most dangerous form of self-sabotage is blaming the outside world. It feels relieving. It feels justified, but it quietly hands away control. The moment you reclaim responsibility without shame, you regain momentum. Those who overcome self-sabotage don't become fearless. They become self-aware. They understand that discomfort isn't danger, that resistance often signals growth, that the urge to retreat is often the sign you're exactly where you need to be. Once you see how people undermine themselves, another layer of human behavior becomes visible. Beneath actions and attitudes live parts of the self that were never allowed expression. Hidden impulses, denied desires, unacknowledged traits. And when those parts are ignored, they don't disappear. They take control. Law 9, the law of repression. Confront your dark side. Every human being carries a shadow, a side of the self that doesn't fit the image we want to present. Traits we deny, desires we suppress, emotions we label as unacceptable, so we push them down. Anger becomes silence. Envy disguises itself as moral superiority. Desire turns into shame. Aggression leaks out as passive resistance. But what is repressed does not disappear. It waits, and eventually it finds another way out. The shadow leaks sideways, through sarcasm that cuts too deep, through sudden emotional outbursts, through irrational dislike for certain people, through compulsive behaviors that contradict stated values. Someone who insists they are calm and rational explodes over minor inconveniences. Someone who prides themselves on kindness carries resentment they refuse to acknowledge. Someone who claims they don't care about status feels deeply wounded when overlooked. The shadow speaks through contradiction. The real danger of repression is not immorality. It is blindness. When people refuse to acknowledge their darker impulses, they become controlled by them. They justify actions they don't understand. They repeat patterns they can't explain. They project blame onto others. The mind protects its self-image at all costs, and in doing so, it lies. History makes this unmistakable. Leaders who portray themselves as moral saviors often become obsessed with punishment. Groups that claim absolute purity grow ruthless toward outsiders. The louder the display of virtue, the more likely something darker is being concealed. Excessive righteousness is often camouflage. You see this pattern in everyday life. A coworker who constantly criticizes others' mistakes cannot tolerate their own. A friend who condemns ambition secretly resents those who succeed. A person who claims to despise toxic people leaves chaos wherever they go. What provokes you intensely in others is often something you've buried in yourself. The shadow recognizes its reflection. The solution is not indulgence, it is integration. Acknowledging the shadow does not mean acting it out. It means owning it consciously. Admitting, I am capable of selfishness. I feel envy. I have aggressive impulses. I want recognition. These admissions do not weaken character. They strengthen it. What you see clearly, you can regulate. What you deny, regulates you. Those who confront their dark side develop a rare calm. They are less reactive, less judgmental, less shocked by human behavior. They understand that cruelty, weakness, and contradiction are part of being human, including their own. This makes them harder to manipulate and harder to provoke. The shadow also contains power, assertiveness, drive, boldness, creative intensity. When suppressed, these qualities turn destructive. When acknowledged, they become fuel. Many people stay small not because they lack ability, but because they fear their own strength. So they repress it, and then resent those who don't. The goal is not to eliminate darkness. That is impossible. The goal is to bring it into awareness so it no longer controls behavior from behind the scenes. When the shadow is faced, self-sabotage weakens. Emotional volatility decreases. Projections dissolve. Clarity replaces confusion. Those who refuse to confront their shadow spend their lives fighting invisible enemies. Those who face it stop being surprised by themselves. And that is real self-mastery. Yet even after the shadow is integrated, another inner force quietly distorts perception, a seductive voice that whispers, "You are special. You deserve more. You are destined for greatness." When unchecked, it creates illusion. Law 10, the law of envy. Beware the fragile ego. Envy is one of the most dangerous forces in human nature, not because it explodes, but because it conceals itself. People rarely admit envy. They dress it up as criticism, as concern, as just being realistic. But envy has a precise trigger: someone else's success, happiness, or recognition. The pain it creates is not about loss. It is about comparison. Someone else's rise makes people feel smaller. Someone else's joy highlights what they lack. Someone else's attention feels like something stolen. And the fragile ego cannot tolerate that sensation. Envy does not announce itself. It smiles, it congratulates, it applauds, and then it undermines. How envy actually operates. Envy begins the moment a person feels inferior, but cannot accept that feeling consciously. So the mind defends itself. Instead of admitting, "I feel small," it says, "They don't deserve it." Instead of, "I'm insecure," it says, "They just got lucky." Instead of, "I want what they have," it says, "They're not even that impressive." This is why envy is strongest among friends, colleagues, siblings, peers at the same level. Strangers don't provoke it. Superiors rarely do. Equals do, because comparison is unavoidable. A pattern from history. In Renaissance Italy, artists worked side by side, competing for commissions, influence, and legacy. Some responded to rivals by refining their craft. Others responded more quietly. They spread rumors. They questioned technique. They chipped away at reputations. Not because their rivals harmed them, but because nearby success felt unbearable. The most dangerous opponent was not the open rival. It was the smiling peer. History repeats this pattern endlessly. How envy shows up today. Once you learn to see it, it's everywhere. A friend minimizes your achievement. That's good, but it's not that big. A coworker delays your progress subtly. Missed messages, lost urgency, quiet resistance. A relative highlights your flaws immediately after your success. Sometimes envy turns cold. sometimes sarcastic, sometimes overly polite, rarely aggressive, because envy wants distance, not confrontation. It wants to pull you down without being exposed. Why envy is so bitter? Envy carries a silent wish that the other person should lose what they have, not so the envious person can gain it, but so balance feels restored. This is why envious people feel relief when others fail, and why success so often attracts resentment, not admiration. Envy never rests. It watches, it measures, it compares endlessly. The real danger. The greatest mistake with envy is assuming goodwill. People overshare. They celebrate openly. They expect support from those who feel threatened. But envy feeds on exposure. The more visible your success, the more fragile egos you awaken. This doesn't mean living in hiding. It means discernment. Not every smile is safe. Not every applause is sincere. How to protect yourself. First, learn the signals. Subtle put-downs, backhanded compliments, muted enthusiasm at your wins, quiet satisfaction at your setbacks. Second, don't confront envy directly. That only intensifies it. Instead, practice modesty with success, redirect attention, share credit generously. Allow others to save face. The aim is not to defeat envy, but to neutralize it, turning envy into insight. Envy is not only something to guard against, it is something to study. When you feel envy yourself, it points to desire, something you want, something you haven't yet claimed. If denied, envy turns bitter. If examined, it becomes direction. Why this law matters. Envy destroys relationships quietly. It corrodes teams. It fractures friendships that looked solid on the surface. But once you understand it, behavior becomes readable, appearances lose their power, surprises disappear. You move with awareness, not suspicion. Because the most dangerous hostility often wears the mask of approval. And understanding envy grants you clarity, restraint, and strategic calm. Law 11, the law of grandiosity. Know your limits. Grandiosity is not loud arrogance. It is quieter and far more seductive. It is the inner voice that whispers, I'm meant for something bigger. I deserve more than this. I'm different from others. At first, it feels like confidence, even inspiration. But left unchecked, grandiosity becomes a trap. It pulls people away from reality, from limits, patience, and the slow discipline that real growth demands. Grandiosity is not confidence. It is compensation. Where grandiosity comes from. At its core, grandiosity is fear. Fear of being ordinary. Fear of failure. Fear that effort might expose weakness. So instead of slowly building skill, people inflate identity. Instead of earning status, they imagine destiny. Instead of learning, they declare themselves exceptional. The mind jumps ahead, to success without struggle, to recognition without repetition. But reality never negotiates with fantasy. How grandiosity shows up. You've seen this pattern before. Someone who talks endlessly about future success but never completes anything. Someone who rejects feedback because they already understand. Someone who jumps from idea to idea, convinced the next one will finally confirm their greatness. Someone who refuses to start small because small feels humiliating. Grandiosity avoids limits because limits feel like exposure. A pattern from history. History is filled with figures who rose quickly, believed in their exceptional destiny, and then stopped listening. Early success hardened into certainty. Certainty turned into overreach. They ignored warning signs. They dismissed counsel. They confused momentum with invincibility. What destroyed them was not lack of talent, it was excess belief in themselves. The higher they climbed, the less grounded they became. And reality eventually corrected the illusion, without mercy. The dangerous illusion. Grandiosity creates a false timeline. Results should be immediate. Recognition should arrive early. Mastery should appear without repetition. When life resists, bitterness follows. They blame systems. They blame people. They lose energy. Not because they lack ability, but because they refuse patience. Grandiosity promises shortcuts. Life offers none. How to spot it in others. Watch for confidence without evidence. Disdain for basic work. Resistance to learning. Obsession with image over substance. These people speak well, but build nothing. They appear ambitious, but avoid discomfort. They want the rewards of mastery without submitting to the process that creates it. How to spot it in yourself. Grandiosity hides behind rational thoughts. It sounds like, I'm above this level. This is beneath me. Once they recognize my potential, the moment you feel entitled to outcomes without matching effort, pause. That is grandiosity speaking. The antidote, grounding. Reality over fantasy, process over image, discipline over mood. True confidence is built through repetition, through showing up, through quiet improvement. The most powerful people are rarely loud. They are precise, patient, relentlessly consistent. They don't announce greatness, they construct it. Why this law matters. Grandiosity isolates people. It clouds judgment. It invites catastrophic error. Knowing your limits does the opposite. It sharpens perception. It deepens learning. It keeps you flexible. When you respect reality, reality responds. Because true power is not believing you are special. It is becoming so capable that you no longer need to say it. Law 12, the law of gender rigidity. Reconnect to the masculine or feminine within you. From an early age, we're taught how we're supposed to be, what to express, what to suppress, what earns approval, and what invites judgment. Strength is encouraged, sensitivity is restrained, ambition is praised, vulnerability is questioned. Over time, these messages harden into identity. And slowly, people stop becoming themselves. They become performances. What gender rigidity really is. Gender rigidity has little to do with biology. It has everything to do with limitation. It's the belief that certain qualities belong on one side and that expressing the other side is weakness. So people amputate parts of themselves. They trade flexibility for acceptance, authenticity for safety. But human beings are strongest when they are whole. When traits are denied, their energy doesn't disappear. It resurfaces indirectly, often destructively. How it shows up. You see the consequences everywhere. A man who refuses vulnerability until emotion escapes as rage. A woman who minimizes ambition to avoid being judged or resisted. A leader who overuses aggression to mask uncertainty. A partner who avoids tenderness because closeness feels unsafe. Rigidity doesn't produce strength, it produces imbalance. A lesson from history. History offers a consistent lesson. Those who ruled only through force were feared, but not trusted. Those who relied only on charm lost authority when pressure arrived. The most effective figures combine traits, assertiveness with empathy, decisiveness with patience, discipline with intuition. Their power came from range, not rigidity. Why rigidity damages relationships. When people deny parts of themselves, relationships pay the price. Emotions go unspoken. Needs remain unmet. Misunderstandings compound. One person withdraws, the other resents. Not because they don't care, but because they lack permission to express their full humanity. Rigid identities block connection. The hidden advantage of integration. When someone integrates both sides within themselves, something subtle but powerful shifts. They become calm under pressure, assertive without cruelty, compassionate without fragility, confident without domination. They listen more accurately. They respond instead of react. They adapt instead of defend. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about reclaiming what was suppressed. How to apply this law? Notice where you restrict yourself, where emotion feels unsafe, where ambition feels forbidden, where strength becomes performance instead of balance. Growth begins with permission, permission to feel, permission to act, permission to be complex. Because human power does not come from one dimension. It comes from wholeness. Why this law matters. Rigidity locks people into repetition. Wholeness unlocks potential. When you reclaim the full range of your nature, relationships deepen, leadership stabilizes, confidence becomes grounded. You stop reacting from insecurity and start acting from alignment, and alignment is unmistakable. As this inner balance develops, another pattern becomes visible. Many people move through life without direction, reacting to circumstances instead of choosing their path. Law 13, the law of aimlessness. Advance with a sense of purpose. Many people aren't lost because they lack talent. They're lost because they lack direction. They move, but without intention. They stay busy but feel empty. They react, but rarely choose. Aimlessness doesn't always look like failure. Often it looks like comfort. What aimlessness really is. Aimlessness isn't laziness, it's drift. It's waking up without an inner compass, letting moods dictate actions, letting circumstances and other people set the pace. Without direction, energy scatters. Attention weakens. Motivation erodes. A person without purpose becomes easy to influence by trends, pressure, distraction, and fear. How it shows up, you see the signs clearly. A capable person jumping between paths, never committing. Someone talented but unfocused, always almost there. A life filled with motion, yet lacking meaning. Without a clear aim, even achievement feels hollow. Movement without direction creates exhaustion, not progress. A truth revealed over time, history reveals a consistent pattern. Those who advanced with clarity endured hardship. Those who chased comfort, approval, or ease drifted, even when opportunity was abundant. Purpose acts like gravity. It pulls choices into alignment. It filters distraction. It gives struggle meaning. Without it, people wander and quietly blame the world for their dissatisfaction. What purpose really does? Purpose doesn't make life easy. It makes life coherent. It gives you a reason to say no, a standard for decision-making, a reason to endure discomfort without resentment. With purpose, setbacks don't destroy momentum. Criticism loses its sting. Comparison fades in importance. You stop measuring yourself against others and start measuring yourself against your own direction. How to apply this law? Ask one honest question. What am I advancing toward? Consistently. Not what excites you temporarily, not what earns approval, but what continues to pull you forward even when motivation disappears. Purpose doesn't arrive fully formed. It is shaped through commitment, by choosing one direction and staying long enough to be transformed by it. Why this law matters. Aimlessness weakens character. Purpose strengthens it. Without direction, people drift into envy, resentment, and distraction. With direction, even hardship feels worthwhile. You don't need certainty, you need orientation. Because a life with purpose moves forward, even through confusion, resistance, and doubt. Smooth end. When direction becomes clear, energy returns, choices simplify, confidence stabilizes, life stops feeling reactive. You are no longer wandering, you are advancing. And that single shift from drift to direction changes everything. Law 14, the law of conformity. Resist the downward pull of the group. Humans like to believe they think independently, that their opinions are their own, that their choices come from reason. But put people in a group and something shifts. Judgment softens, doubt disappears, responsibility dissolves. The group begins to think for them. What conformity really is? Conformity isn't agreement. It's relief. Relief from standing alone, from being judged, from taking full responsibility for a choice. Inside a group, people feel protected, and that protection comes at a cost. Individual thought weakens, moral boundaries blur, actions become easier and often worse. How the group changes people. A person who is calm alone becomes aggressive in a crowd. Someone ethical in private laughs at cruelty when others do. A cautious mind grows reckless when responsibility is shared. Not because people suddenly change, but because the group lowers the inner voice that normally restrains them. In numbers, people feel less visible, less accountable, less themselves. A pattern repeated through history. History is filled with moments where groups drifted downward, slowly at first, then all at once. Ordinary people participated in acts they would have rejected on their own. Not from hatred, not from conviction, but from silence, from imitation, from the comfort of blending in. The most dangerous force in groups is not aggression, it's passivity. How conformity shows up today. You see it everywhere. A team supports a bad decision because no one wants to be the dissenter. Friends ridicule someone because laughter feels safer than objection. Online crowds attack strangers because outrage is rewarded. The group doesn't ask for your values. It asks for your participation. And the moment you stop thinking independently, you become movable. The illusion of safety. Conformity promises belonging, but it delivers loss. Loss of judgment, loss of clarity, loss of self-respect. People later say, I didn't mean it. I was just going along. It wasn't really me. But it was. The group didn't act. Individuals did. How to resist the pull. Resistance doesn't require rebellion. It requires awareness. Pause when emotion rises in groups. Question unanimity. Notice how quickly opinions harden when shared. Those who remain calm, observant, and slightly detached see more clearly. They don't need to dominate. They don't need to persuade. Their strength is restraint. Why this law matters. Groups are powerful. They shape behavior more than logic or intention. If you don't learn how to resist their pull, you will be carried by it, often in directions you'll later regret. But when you stay rooted in your own judgment, something shifts. You don't lose connection. You gain perspective. And that perspective keeps you above the current instead of being dragged beneath it. As we continue, this understanding of group behavior reveals something deeper. How unstable group loyalty really is, and how quickly admiration turns into indifference. Law 15, the law of fickleness, make them want to follow you. Groups don't just conform, they change their minds. Quickly, emotionally, without warning. Admiration turns into doubt. Support fades into silence. Enthusiasm disappears as fast as it appeared. This isn't betrayal, it's human nature. What fickleness really is. Fickleness is emotional dependency. People follow what feels right in the moment, not what is consistent, fair, or true. Crowds don't commit, they respond. When confidence is visible, they admire it. When uncertainty appears, they retreat. Loyalty lasts only as long as reassurance does. How it shows up. You've seen this pattern many times. A team celebrates an idea until risk enters the picture. Support vanishes when results take time. A leader is praised until pressure rises. The same crowd begins to question them. Online, applause is instant. So is abandonment. People don't turn against you. They turn toward whatever feels safer next. A pattern that repeats. History reveals this clearly. Crowds elevate figures quickly and discard them just as fast. Not because the person changed, but because emotion did. What inspired people yesterday can make them uneasy today. And discomfort always seeks escape. Why people follow and leave. People follow strength, clarity, and calm. They leave confusion, hesitation, and fear. They don't want explanations. They want reassurance. This is why consistency matters more than popularity. Those who chase approval become reactive. Those who remain grounded stay influential. The common mistake. Most people take fickleness personally. They explain, they chase, they reshape themselves to regain approval. And in doing so, they weaken the very presence that attracted people in the first place. Crowds don't respect neediness. They sense it and quietly withdraw. The quiet form of leadership. The ones people return to don't beg for loyalty. They stay composed. They hold their direction. They let emotional waves pass without reacting. This steadiness creates gravity. People may drift, but they come back to what feels solid. Why this law matters. If you expect loyalty from groups, you will be disappointed. If you understand their nature, you remain unaffected. You stop chasing attention. You stop measuring yourself by applause. And paradoxically, that's when people want to follow you. Because in a world ruled by shifting moods, stability becomes rare and irresistibly attractive. And once you understand how crowds shift emotionally, another force comes into focus: the aggression that surfaces when fear and momentum collide. Law 16, the law of aggression. See the hostility behind the friendly facade. People are rarely as polite, calm, or composed as they appear. That coworker who smiles at you but undermines your ideas. The friend who always helps, yet subtly reminds you of your shortcomings. Even strangers who seem overly courteous can hide agendas. Aggression is not always obvious. It often wears a mask: charm, politeness, or humor. But underneath, it's always there, a natural force we try to suppress. Civilization has only tamed aggression. It has not eliminated it. The many faces of aggression. Some people turn aggression outward. Passive-aggressive behavior is the most common form. The subtle superior, always one step ahead, constantly reminding you of your place. The sympathy seeker, a perpetual victim, draining energy while controlling attention. The insinuator, compliments that sting more than they soothe. The blame shifter, somehow you end up apologizing for their misdeeds. The passive tyrant, nothing you do is ever enough. Dissatisfaction becomes a tool of control. Others turn aggression inward. Anxiety, self-doubt, depression, a hidden, corrosive form that quietly shapes behavior. How aggression shows up. Aggression is universal. A sports teammate who subtly blocks another's success. A coworker who criticizes behind your back while smiling face to face. A friend who drains energy by turning every conversation to their problems. Even when people appear calm, the desire to dominate, compete, or control is often quietly at work. Channeling aggression. The key is not suppression, it's redirection. Start with awareness. Notice your own aggressive impulses. Understand what drives others' aggression: fear, envy, ambition, or wounded pride. Then act strategically. Turn frustration into action. Stand firm without hostility. Speak clearly and assertively. Respond with precision, not emotion. The goal isn't confrontation, it's control. Why this law matters. Aggression is inevitable. Ignoring it or denying it gives it power. By recognizing it, you protect yourself from hidden hostility. Convert raw energy into ambition. Respond with strategy instead of reaction. The person who controls aggression, theirs and others, becomes the calm anchor in a storm of emotion. And once you master this, you begin noticing something deeper: how generations, shaped by the events of their formative years, inherit biases, blind spots, and predispositions that silently guide behavior. Law 17. The law of generational myopia. Seize the historical moment. Every generation sees the world through the lens of its own experiences. We inherit beliefs, habits, and blind spots from parents, teachers, and leaders, often without questioning them. Every generation is blind to its own biases, yet projects them onto the future. Short-term thinking dominates. We chase comfort, recognition, or excitement, ignoring long-term consequences. Examples from history: leaders repeating the mistakes of the past, blind to inherited lessons. Societies prioritizing quick profit over stability, collapsing decades later. Individuals following trends, missing opportunities to act wisely in their own moment. Generational myopia is subtle. You might not notice it in yourself, but repeated errors, fleeting trends, and blind adherence to convention reveal it. The strategic advantage. The advantage goes to those who see beyond the immediate moment, who anticipate long-term consequences, understand historical cycles, and act decisively when opportunity strikes. Those who master this law learn from patterns across generations, resist short-term impulses, build influence and impact that lasts. Once you see these patterns, another universal truth becomes clear: mortality itself. Law 18. The law of death. Denial. Meditate on our common mortality. Humans instinctively avoid thinking about death, but denial comes at a hidden cost. We overwork, overspend, chase status, or remain in toxic relationships, all in a futile attempt to feel immortal. We pursue fame, wealth, or recognition, hoping to leave a mark before time runs out. To accept death is to embrace life fully. How death denial distorts priorities, acting on short-term impulses instead of long-term values, ignoring meaningful relationships in favor of trivial pursuits, delaying important decisions, assuming there's always more time. The power of acceptance. Those who confront mortality gain clarity, focus, and purpose. They prioritize what truly matters. Invest in enduring relationships and meaningful work. Make conscious decisions instead of fearful ones. Meditating on death is liberating. It strips away trivialities, exposes what's essential, and fuels deliberate living. Every moment gains weight. Every decision gains meaning. You act for substance, not illusion. See clearly. Act wisely. Human nature, time, and mortality shape everything. Behind every action is emotion. Behind every habit is a pattern. Behind every choice is hidden motivation. Mastering these laws doesn't give control over others. It gives clarity, calm, and power over yourself. You respond instead of reacting. You choose instead of guessing. You connect instead of being deceived. Start today with these 3 actionable steps. 1. Watch emotions, not words. Notice the feelings behind actions. Don't be fooled by what people say. Pay attention to behavior. 2. Spot repetition. See character. Recurring habits reveal true motives. Respond wisely. Don't react impulsively. 3. Plan beyond the moment. Resist short-term impulses. Consider long-term consequences in decisions, relationships, and goals. Master these, and you'll see yourself and others with unprecedented clarity. Life doesn't get simpler, but navigating it becomes far easier. Which of these 3 will you start applying today? Comment below, like, and subscribe. See you in the next video.